I don't know how many of my viewers are aware of the work of Philip K. Dick, but some of the most interesting Hollywood stories that have been made into movies have been his work. Films such as Blade Runner, Total Recall, Imposter, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, Paycheck, Next, Screamers. These are all his stories. These are all stories that came out of the mind and arguably out of the life of Philip K. Dick. And these days, it seems Hollywood is more into ripping people off almost in real time and synthesizing their rip-offs from particular individuals. And I think it's really sad that the state of affairs in cinema, in Hollywood, is where it is, with so many remakes and all this unoriginal material that seems to be kind of stuck in time. And I don't know, with the internet and with all of the other sorts of things that happen, whether or not there's going to be a sort of revolution in consciousness, in the way that we understand things or not. But another thing that is interesting is in this show Lost, the character Richard Alpert, who, if you look up Richard Alpert, who he was with respect to the 60s, it sort of gives you an idea of the underlying story, the sort of metaphor that TV show, that TV series is based on. And I think it's sad that people, rather than living their real lives and living in the real world, have to live vicariously through these other mediums, and that the stories, the rich stories, the really interesting stories that people have about the nature of reality are so controlled, in a sense, are so manipulated, that it has to be packaged and sold to people rather than people getting it from either their own experience with the real world or from their own lives. And so I don't know, as far as this Knowing movie, what the particular details are, as far as where this story came from exactly, and who and wherefore and why details were chosen by whomever to produce this work. And what you're going to find out about my work is that the issue of the solar cycle is one of the central focuses of my research for the past 4 or 5 years. The solar cycle has been sort of the central feature in a lot of my research. And if I present the details on that, it might keep, in a sense, me from losing my own story, but at the same time, it would make my life a little more difficult. And so I'm sort of torn. And a lot of people would say that, like a lot of Philip K. Dick's ideas, that some of my ideas are fairly crazy. His mania, a lot of people believe, was fueled by his experience with psychedelic drugs such as LSD. And how people approach that, how people deal with that issue is different. And I think that there's some serious work that humanity has to do as a culture there, because there's a denial that's involved. There's a sort of denial about not just the details about individuals, but the details about reality, the details about what our reality is and how it operates. Obviously, with astrotometry, I'm bringing in a serious piece of the puzzle. I'm unpackaging and you could argue repackaging some ancient understanding about the nature of the world as it relates to the concept of as above, so below, and how our world manifests through time. And these issues are central to this concept of what the solar cycle is, because it relates to the manifestation of humanity as a phenomenon. In other words, it relates to our our physical manifestation through time and what happens to us through time. And if you look at the metaphor between the sun and the moon, if you look at the inherent symbolism and the physical connections that the moon makes to our physiology and the sun makes to our physiology, these things can be sorted out. These details can be understood. And the possibility that there are multiple worlds is less of a question for people who have certain sorts of experience. And so there's a issue of familiarity. There's an issue of how we work with these concepts and what these things are going to mean when they are assimilated into our culture, if they are assimilated into our culture. And I think the problem is if they're not assimilated into our culture, then the culture gets in trouble. And I think that that's when it faces its most dire consequences, is when it is unable to deal with the reality or the details of its own manifestation. And so this is all heavy, heavy stuff, I realize. But there are very real indications that from these higher energy forms that manifest through the sun, that the Earth is challenged with gigantic electromagnetic storms, and that what is our electromagnetic infrastructure could be completely compromised in a matter of hours. And that how our culture would recover from such an occurrence is unclear. It's unclear how we would deal with that sort of situation, that sort of conundrum. And the people who are brave enough to deal with these realities find themselves in difficult situations, to say the least. And so just in bringing this up, just in making people aware of this sort of thing, there's a sort of stigma that's attached to the work, my work. And not that there isn't enough of that already, but the details about this particular issue are rather disturbing. And if you do the research on it, humanity seems fairly unprepared for what might be in the not too distant future. Now, I'm going to just say right off the bat that if there are multiple worlds that we navigate to individually or collectively that involve variations in these sorts of energies as they manifest, then certain realities would be sort of better off than other realities with respect to these things. And sorting that out has been the realm of all of our religions. As I pointed out in some of my other videos, the understanding of the nature of this higher energy, these periods where it rains fire, and there's all this natural, seemingly godlike upheaval of the earth and the world. In these periods, what we know of recorded history is sort of erased. The cultures collapse, and so the information, the knowledge, the understanding is sort of discontinued. And if you can imagine, our electronic infrastructure has only existed in its present form for about 20 years. And as far as electricity itself, it's only been a little more than a century since it's been employed widely. And so if you look at that with respect to the depth of our history, of our known history, it's a very, very, very tiny fraction